In 43 AD, the Roman Empire stood at the height of its power, vast, administratively sophisticated, and militarily unmatched. Under Emperor Claudius, expansion was not
Senators.
simply a continuation of
The empire
policy,
stands at a
it was a
delicate
necessity for legitimacy. Claudius,
choose wisdom
who had come to
over
power
haste.
under circumstances
We
that
stand
left
at a
his
precipice.
authority questioned, required
Rome's
a decisive
future
and
demands
visible
strength,
victory.
not
Britannia, a distant and
will not
only
tolerate
partially
hesitation.
understood island at the edge of the known world, presented the ideal objective symbolically powerful, strategically useful, and politically advantageous. Britannia had long existed in Roman awareness. Nearly a century earlier, Julius Caesar had launched expeditions to its shores, encountering fierce tribal resistance and documenting a land rich in resources and complexity. Yet his incursions had been exploratory rather than transformative. No permanent foothold had been established. Since then, Britannia remained outside the formal boundaries of Roman control, linked through trade but governed entirely by its own internal dynamics. Those dynamics, however, were fractured. The island was divided among numerous Celtic tribes, each with its own leadership, alliances, and rivalries, to an empire built on order and consolidation. This fragmentation was not a deterrent, it was an exploitable weakness. They were immediately met with resistance. Native Britons, led by figures such as Caradicus, organized a defense rooted in mobility and terrain advantage. Unlike the rigid formations of Rome, Briton warriors relied on speed, ambush tactics, and intimate knowledge of forests, rivers, and marshlands. Early engagements were chaotic and brutal, culminating in a major confrontation at the River Medway. For days, the two forces clashed in a relentless struggle. The Britons fought with fierce determination, but Roman discipline proved decisive. Shield walls held firm, formations advanced methodically, and coordination overcame unpredictability. Step by step, the Romans pushed forward. As resistance weakened, the campaign took on a new dimension when Claudius himself arrived in Britannia. His presence was a calculated display of imperial authority. Reinforcements followed, and according to historical accounts, even war elephants were deployed creatures, unfamiliar to the Britons and psychologically overwhelming. The capture of Camulodunum marked a turning point, establishing Rome's first major stronghold on the island and symbolizing the beginning of formal occupation.
Warriors of the
Resistance
tribe,
emerged quickly
hear me.
and forcefully.
The invaders
Tribal
press our
leaders,
lands.
including Caradicus,
Sharpen your
began
spears.
organizing
We fight
defensive
at dawn.
efforts against the invaders.
freedom.
The Britons did not attempt to
Romans.
mirror Roman tactics.
Romans.
Instead, they leveraged what they knew best: the land itself. Their warfare emphasized speed, flexibility, and psychological pressure. Ambushes were frequent, supply lines were targeted, and terrain was used to offset Roman discipline. These methods created an unpredictable battlefield, one in which conventional Roman superiority was initially challenged. The early engagements were intense and often chaotic. The Battle of the River Medway stands out as a defining moment. Over the course of several days, Roman and Briton forces clashed repeatedly. The Britons launched aggressive assaults, seeking to overwhelm through momentum and numbers. The Romans responded with structure shield formations, coordinated advances, and strict command hierarchy, while individual Briton warriors displayed remarkable courage. The Roman system proved more sustainable under prolonged pressure. Their ability to maintain formation, rotate units, and execute coordinated attacks gradually shifted the balance. What began as a contested struggle evolved into a controlled advance. Following this turning point, Roman momentum increased. Tribal resistance began to fragment under sustained pressure. Strategic positions were captured, and pathways into the interior of the island opened. It was at this stage that Emperor Claudius made his move. His arrival in Britannia was both symbolic and strategic. By appearing on the battlefield, he transformed the campaign into a personal triumph. Reinforcements accompanied him, and historical accounts suggest the inclusion of war elephants, an element designed to intimidate and disorient opposing forces unfamiliar with such animals. The psychological impact was significant. reinforcing the perception of Roman dominance. The capture of Camulodunum marked the formal establishment of Roman authority. It became the administrative center of the new province, a base from which governance and further expansion could be directed. Yet the Roman approach to conquest extended far beyond military occupation. Their objective was integration, and integration required infrastructure, administration, and cultural influence. Construction began almost immediately. Roads were engineered with precision, cutting through forests and across terrain that had previously hindered movement. These roads were not merely practical, they were instruments of control, enabling rapid troop deployment and facilitating trade. Fortresses were established at key locations, creating a network of defensive and administrative nodes. Urban centers developed with characteristic Roman features, forums for governance, bathhouses for social life, and organized street layouts that imposed order on previously unstructured settlements. As these systems took hold, the process of Romanization began. Latin became the language of administration and commerce. Roman law introduced standardized legal frameworks, replacing or reshaping local customs. Economic integration accelerated, connecting Britannia to a vast network that extended across the empire. Goods flowed in both directions. Imports such as wine, olive oil, and manufactured goods entered the island, while exports including metals and agricultural products supported the broader Roman economy. Despite these developments, Roman control was not absolute. Beneath the surface, resentment persisted among segments of the population who viewed Roman rule as an imposition rather than a benefit. This tension erupted dramatically in the rebellion led by Boudica, queen of the Iceni, triggered by acts of injustice and humiliation inflicted by Roman authorities. Her uprising rapidly expanded into a large-scale revolt. Unlike earlier resistance, this was coordinated and widespread. Boudica's forces struck with speed and intensity. Roman settlements were overwhelmed before adequate defenses could be organized. Camulodunum was destroyed. Its symbolic significance turned against its occupiers. Londinium, still in its formative stage, was abandoned by Roman officials and subsequently burned. The scale of destruction was immense. Entire communities were wiped out, and the illusion of complete Roman control was shattered. For a brief period, the outcome of the Roman presence in Britannia was uncertain. However, the structural strengths of the Roman military reasserted themselves. Under Governor Gaius Suetonius Paulinus, remaining forces were consolidated and reorganized. Rather than engaging recklessly, the Romans selected terrain that limited the effectiveness of Boudica's larger force. In the decisive battle that followed, discipline, coordination, and tactical positioning once again proved decisive. The rebellion was crushed, and Roman authority was re-established. In the aftermath, governance evolved. Roman officials adopted a more calculated approach, balancing enforcement with stability. Romanization continued, but with greater sensitivity to local conditions. Over time, a hybrid culture emerged, one that combined Roman administrative structure with elements of native tradition. This blending created a more sustainable provincial identity, allowing Britannia to function as a stable part of the empire. Expansion efforts continued, particularly toward the north, but encountered increasing resistance. The tribes inhabiting what is now Scotland proved difficult to subdue, and the terrain further complicated military operations. The cost of continued expansion began to outweigh its benefits. In response, Rome shifted strategy from expansion to consolidation. The construction of Hadrian's Wall embodied this shift. Stretching across northern England, the wall functioned as both a defensive structure and a statement of imperial, a clear boundary between controlled territory and unconquered land. For centuries, Britannia remained within the Roman sphere. Its cities grew, its economy integrated, and its society adapted to the structures imposed by imperial rule. Generations were born into a world shaped by Roman governance, where roads connected, distant regions and law provided a consistent framework for order. The island, once fragmented and isolated, had become part of a larger system. Yet the stability Rome created was not immune to broader changes. By the early 5th century, the empire faced mounting challenges: external invasions, internal political instability, and economic strain. Maintaining distant provinces like Britannia became increasingly difficult. Ultimately, the decision was made to withdraw. Roman legions were recalled, leaving the island without the centralized authority that had defined it for centuries. The departure marked the end of Roman rule, but not the end of Roman influence. The infrastructure remained. Roads continued to guide movement, cities persisted as centers of activity, and administrative concepts influenced emerging systems of governance. The legacy of Rome became embedded in the foundation of what would eventually become England. The Roman conquest of Britain was therefore more than a military achievement. It was a prolonged process of transformation: political, cultural, and structural. It reshaped the island's identity, integrating it into a wider world while simultaneously altering its internal dynamics. Even after the empire's presence faded, its impact endured, woven into the landscape and the historical trajectory of the region.